Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and we got a lot to talk about, including our star right here, Joey B, Joe Biden. So much going around with Joe Biden, the supposed front runner for the Democrats in 2020, even though I am not so sure that is the case. And to discuss this with me, we've got MediaRoots.org's own Robbie Martin. He's got his own YouTube channel here at a very heavy agenda. Go subscribe right now. And if you're not following him on Twitter, also an excellent Twitter feed. So we haven't talked since before the last debate when Tulsi Gabbard was actually not allowed in. We whittled it down to 10 establishment candidates. We had Kamala Harris and we had Cory Booker and Beto O'Rourke both polling at less than 1%. But that's fine. You know, they're there. But now,
do you see Beto's hoverboard?
I saw the dude. You know what Beto should do? I was thinking about this today, just to go full punk rock. Like Hillary Clinton said today, I did a video where the People magazine headline was that people need to get over it when in regards to Joe Biden's creepy touching, right? But in there, she says that we need to elect anybody else. We need Trump out there. And I'm thinking, anybody else? That sounds a lot like Beto O'Rourke. Maybe he should come out in one of his little sheep outfits from his rock band days with a little Hitler mustache. And you got to figure, hey, Hillary Clinton's saying anybody else, so a Beto Hitler stash could be huge. That's just my opinion. However, let's talk a little bit more serious, right? Right now, once again, to me it feels like the scandal about the scandal has become the scandal. What do I mean? You and I think, even briefly touched on Burisma and the crooked Biden deals and them being investigated back in April. I think we had that conversation and how he had been caught at the CFR bragging about how he got the guy fired. Somehow, 5 months later, we're past Russian collusion, we're past obstruction of justice, and now we have more election interference regarding the Ukraine, another foreign state that's an impeachable offense based on what Biden did to move this prosecutor out. We are in bizarro world, Robbie. Take it from there, my friend.
Yeah, it's putting it mildly, Jason. It's strange how all roads lead to Ukraine, isn't it? It's like the Ukraine keeps coming back into the picture over and over and over again. And it's funny. So there's two things here that are being completely not discussed or debated among the media class. One of them, which I think is probably the most pressing thing in all of this, is the idea that we're sending over something like $300 million in aid to give actual weapons to the Ukrainian army to fight Russian separatists in Ukraine. I mean, that alone should be something that should be heavily debated. But the strange thing is, Jason, this was like a overwhelmingly bipartisan pushed bill back at I think the last term of Obama. And since then, this funding has been held up for various reasons. There were leaks from the Obama administration that said he didn't want to escalate things with Russia. That's why he sat on it. That's why there was a clause saying that he could basically not sign it into law. Allegedly, Trump is leveraging it because he wants them to investigate Joe Biden's son. But yet Trump is bragging about how he's, of course, more of a tough guy than Obama. He said recently, Obama gave them pillows. I gave them, anti-tank missiles. So that's not a good thing, dude. That's actually really dangerous. So I find that interesting that this is not even being debated or discussed. It's like, why are we sending this much money to Ukraine? And we already have been, just for the record, we already have been sending them plenty of money, just technically not for these offensive weapons. Defensive weapons, I guess, is what they already are being funded, from by the U.S. government. And then another part of it that's hilarious is the whole Hunter Biden aspect of it. The fact that he was making $50,000 a month at this gas company with no prior experience, and then the fact that the neoliberal sort of mainstream media circuit like CNN and MSNBC accurately did report on Biden's son getting this job back when it happened as a scandal, back before the era of Trump, back before everybody on that side were good guys. They agreed that it was scandalous. And funnily enough, Jason, apparently even people in the Obama administration thought that the optics of it were so bad that they were like wanting Biden not to do it. But he did it anyways. So
and then bragged about it. And then
Yeah.
bragged about it next to Richard Haas, the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, to an audience of what I can only assume are other millionaires in the Council on Foreign Relations, like a gangster. He literally says it like this. I can't harp on this enough. He says he had a prearrangement, which should have been a scandal in itself, a prearrangement with Poroshenko and Levenko to have the guy fired in the first place before he got there. Then they weren't fired, so he goes to Poroshenko and he says, well, I'm on a plane in 6 hours. Fuck you. Maybe you want to bring your daughter in here so I can inappropriately touch her on camera. I'm not sure, but we're not going to make this deal. Then he says, well, you're not the president. And he says, call him. Like, call him. So right there, on that move there, I mean, Obama would be culpable in already making this deal with Biden. Or, I mean, what's he going to say after the fact? No, Joey B acted on his own. We didn't have this prearrangement. And so he folds. And now I'm forced to tweet out people like Rudy Giuliani, who I really don't like, because he's the only guy reading the sworn affidavit from the prosecutor who got fired that states that he was, in fact, investing in Burisma and especially Hunter Biden. But the media, I mean, Jake Tapper went tit for tat with Jim Jordan, another guy I'm not in love with, saying that's not why he was fired. And the reason he was fired was that he wasn't fighting corruption. We live in the upside down, Robbie.
Yeah, I mean, it's the media has done nothing but expose themselves during this process. And it's so weird to me why they can't just try to be at least a little bit straighter with this and be like, yeah, this is really scandalous, but what Trump's doing is also scandalous. Like the fact that they're not coming from that position severely weakens what they're trying to do. Like if their actual goal is to just unseat Trump, impeach Trump with whatever means possible, then at least take the hit and admit Joe Biden's son and Joe Biden did something really corrupt here, and it looks really bad. I mean, so just that they can't acknowledge that and move forward on that footing, it's just really kind of pathetic, because it's like, I just think in terms of their strategy here, it looks bad, and it just leaves them completely open to like attacks of being completely hypocritical and disingenuous, which they are. I mean, what's the last time they actually talked about being angry about war? It was when Trump did that Saudi arms deal with Yemen. It was like the first time CNN ever mentioned Raytheon's bombs. I'm like, well, you guys would have never mentioned this if Trump wasn't in office.
And you notice, Robbie, that wasn't the scandal that both Congress and the Senate, aside from the joint Israeli ops, voted to get us out of the Yemen situation, and Trump vetoed it. That wasn't in the news cycle half a day. Not a half a day. And, that's my thing. I just did a Mick West podcast, and we talked about this Biden situation. And I said, look, man, if little old Jason Burmis is talking about this 5 months ago, it doesn't bother me that the president might have brought it up now that a new administration is in, so that they could get down to my so-called rival, because it does seem like this is the guy they were pushing to get the nomination. I got to ask you, with him really looking like they can't push him for much longer, when you put the record player on for the baby, like when you there's a couple other people that come to mind for me. I don't think they really believe Pete Bootlicker is electable. Maybe they think that he's a ticket runner, a secondary. I think it's Kamala Harris, man. I think that's the push. That's the one they want to turn the polls for if they can rig a primary in the right direction and get the public on board. And I got to tell you, man, a Kamala Harris, Cory Booker ticket, for me, that might be a country-leaving ticket, because those two are the snakiest establishment politicians that will do whatever the media industrial war complex wants. I want to get your thoughts. You think that my assessment is right with the candidates that are left on the stage? Or are they just going to steamroll through this to Joey B 2020?
Well, let's just say that if they were planning on just like rigging it so that Joe Biden wins, to me, that would translate to they actually want Donald Trump to win, and they're purposely sabotaging the election. So the other thing you said, that they might actually want Kamala Harris to be the front runner, that to me seems more plausible, because look to the first debate. How strange and manufactured was sort of that sneak attack on Joe Biden from Harris, where she had a T-shirt ready saying, "I was that girl," like for sale right after the debate. I mean, that was completely calculated, and not just calculated by her campaign, but it also seemed like the Democratic Party establishment itself had sort of opened the door to that. I was surprised by that. And when I see things like that, it usually, to me, Jason, means that somebody has allowed a battle to take place in sort of the DNC. And that was odd. So I do think you're really onto something there, that this could really be all about her in the end. Because Joe Biden is just so bad. Like, people, I mean, I don't even know if these polls are real. Like, how could anyone below 60 years old, even if you're a Democrat, want to vote for him? I mean, he's the least exciting, does the most gaffes. He says blatantly, let's say racially very insensitive things on a regular basis. And he also, I was just talking to Pierce Redmond about this, he also in a lot of ways resembles Trump's bullishness and his sort of like not giving a shit kind of attitude to a kind of a gross degree. It's like there is some weird similarity between him and Trump's own personality.
If I was in high school with Donald Trump, I would have taken him out back of the schoolyard and I would have kicked his ass. I mean, you're not wrong. But Joey B's always been that way. You know, for instance, I saw a clip posted. I couldn't tell you what year it was. I would assume late 80s, early 90s. Mid 90s max. I can't imagine even being late 90s just because of the way his hair looks. But he starts talking about our aid to Israel, right? And he's talking, at the time, we're giving them $3 billion a year. And he said, for those that think this is wasted money, you have to understand, this is our greatest ally in the Middle East. He goes, if Israel didn't exist, we would have to find a way to create an Israel. And this is pre-war on terror. And in my eyes, he couldn't be more correct in that assumption. And therein lies, that initial Anglo-American, Israeli, Saudi power structure, right? The Saudi Arabians would only give up so much leverage. They still have their traditions, they have their power. But the Israelis, joint military operations, able to launch black ops for plausible deniability, more military-industrial complex again and again and again, having things like the Wexner Group, which come out of the United States, literally writing papers on the post-Saddam, Iraq, and Middle East, and how to get Israeli and United States support for more of the war on terror after that initial shock and awe. So, to me, Biden's being very open and honest there, and he's always been that open, honest, brash person when it comes to imperialistic content, in my opinion.
Yes, he has. And he's also been very, he won't skip a beat when people confront him about really weird and unexplainable things that he's done. I mean, even including, let's just isolate to the weird touching that he's done to people. I mean, he practically doubled down on that shit. He even made a joke when he brought out like an 11-year-old kid, or maybe he was like 9 or something. He brought out like a boy on stage recently, and he just tells the audience, "I had permission to touch him." It's like, why are you even saying that? Like, what is wrong with you? And it's so weird because, I mean, coming from our background, Jason, honestly, one of the first times I remember hearing Joe Biden's name was his mysterious breakfast with Pakistani ISI general. What's his name? You probably know.
General Mahmoud Ahmed. And not having breakfast. So here's the deal. General Mahmoud Ahmed, who is behind this $100,000 wire transfer that is facilitated by Omar Saeed Sheikh, who is convicted of the Daniel Pearl murder, the initial beheading that started this, I would say, psychological warfare campaign against the West. Oh my God, a Western journalist can have their head cut off on video by these bad men? And that's escalated to, putting people in cages or blowing up trucks with rockets, more beheadings, et cetera, et cetera. But that was the all-star start. And he's having breakfast with Bob Graham and Porter Goss on the morning of 9/11. He's facilitated that wire transfer to Muhammad Atta directly a week or so before the attack. I think it was like 10 days is where they finally found it. He's meeting with George Tenet. He's meeting with Condi Rice. George Tenet at the time, the head of the CIA. Porter Goss will become the head of the CIA later. Bob Graham and Porter Goss will head up the initial congressional investigation where 28 pages are actually redacted. Bob Graham goes around openly talking about how Mahmoud Ahmed had a relationship with Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, and he wasn't secretive about it. And then Joey B comes on the television on the week of 9/11 and says, 2 days after the attack, he sat down with the General Mahmoud Ahmed, the first or second most powerful man in Pakistan, and he told him basically, hey, join us or we're going to fuck you up. I don't know how else to say it. I've played the videos. He said it very Joey B style. If you want to see even more of that, you can see Joey B before the Senate saying Pakistan pretends to be our friend. They'll have to make hard decisions. Meanwhile, we have Dan Rather coming out in a report in December of 2002, I believe it was, where we find out that Pakistan had bin Laden in a hospital protected by their military on September 10th. And it wasn't one eyewitness or two eyewitnesses. Basically, they had a slew of hospital members come out on video with their faces protected, with their voices changed, and they're like, hey, this is the real deal. And it's so funny you said that, Robbie, because if you go over to C-SPAN, they play a lot, right? Well, in the United Nations Assembly, I was just put on to this today by Tony Gosling. Amir Khan, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, said some pretty interesting things about 9/11. He said 4 things, but he spent a lot of time on the war on terror and basically saying how they were duped into joining that war on terror.
Wow.
How the elites in the very beginning have offshore accounts, and how in the world are we allowing this to happen as they have looted his country? And I was just kind of taken aback. C-SPAN didn't carry that. You have to go to the United Nations YouTube to find that video. And I haven't even watched all of it yet, but I am already taken aback by what this guy said. So with Pakistan now saying that they were kind of duped to joining the war on terror, by the way, he brings up how Pakistan's military brought up the Mujahideen with U.S. funding and how the Soviets at that time were calling them the terrorists. Just brilliant stuff by Amir Khan. I'm going to be doing a full-on video about that. But what do you think? I mean, when you literally have other world leaders on that stage calling out the United States for this war on terror, and there is no Western media coverage whatsoever, I mean, are we just inevitably having this Iran thing go down? I mean, we haven't talked since Bolton left. That's another subject we can get into, but roll it out to me, Robbie.
Well, I think we have to separate the war on terror from Iran, even though obviously the pathway into a war with Iran would be from the framing of the war on terror. I think, unfortunately, Jason, the 18 years since 9/11, the war on terror has become so normalized that you hardly see any, not just coverage, but any pushback whatsoever. And I'm even including sectors of like hardcore anti-imperialist leftists that I know. There is very little pushback about the idea of endlessly bombing, running Delta Force raids, covert ops into all these different countries that harbor terrorists. It's strange to me how much it has become normalized. Somalia, Niger, these two countries specifically, there's rarely any talk about why are we even there? Why are we bombing them? Even Pakistan. I mean, the idea of bombing Pakistan with drones is sort of become totally normalized. This was a controversial thing, back even at the beginning of the Obama administration. People were still talking about the perpetuation of the war on terror. When is this going to be over? When are we going to stem the flow of this? When are we going to pull this back? I think that argument's kind of dead, Jason. It's really all kind of revolves around more basic arguments now. Like, when are we going to take the troops out of Afghanistan? Which I think would be wonderful if we did that.
But we're not, by the way. But we're not. Just so you know, I just did a story on it in July where they were talking about sending more. And by the way, every military force other than the Air Force, suicide rates in our military are at record highs. The war on terror is not going away. We're not getting out of Afghanistan. You just talked about the normalization of that military presence everywhere. How about the normalization of Guantanamo Bay, of
Exactly.
Abu
Yeah.
Ghraib, and countless other black sites we have never even heard of with I mean literally I'm just going to say it, I'm sorry, Q-tards out there thinking that Guantanamo Bay is a great place where Trump is on a gravy train with biscuit wheels obtaining deep state members like John McCain and having secret trials where they're executed. I mean, pure delusional. I think that's part of it, Robbie. I think that some of the people have been so tricked into thinking, oh, he's rebuilt the military. Guantanamo Bay's a great place now. That's a problem. I don't know how that mentality seeped into the mainstream other than apathy and idiocy and this kind of like infotainment society we live in. But I would have thought that more people would have fought back. It's not the case.
No, I mean, even Gitmo's a good example. When are we ever going to have another debate about closing Gitmo down? I mean, Obama obviously, completely abandoned his promise to close it down, but that debate's completely vanished. It's almost just not a concern of anybody's anymore, and I find that very disturbing. I am a strong advocate of reclaiming our pre-9/11 mindset, and all of these outcroppings of the war on terror need to be criticized and addressed, and that even includes Homeland Security and ICE, because most people don't realize that ICE actually didn't exist before 9/11. It's an extra addition to Homeland Security. I mean, all these things are.
By the way.
What?
So is the TSA, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like that's even become super normalized. I mean, we forget what it was like to go through airports before the TSA. I mean, and it's. Yeah, and I think ISIS in a lot of ways has sort of broken people's brains. It was releasing those snuff videos. They really psychologically, and the hype that the U.S. media gave them mostly here, I think it's just made people go over a certain tipping point where it's now there's a tacit sort of passive acceptance of, well, we do need to bomb people who are this heinous all the time. Like that's an exception. Like, I'm not saying ISIS are good people. What I'm saying is that, like, the idea that that's acceptable now, that we can send our military into countries just to bomb ISIS, and even people on the left who are super anti-war don't say anything about it, I think is evidence of how normalized this has become. Like, just because a group appears that is more heinous and more evil seeming than the previous group, that doesn't make it any more justified to continue this endless bombing campaign. I mean, it's so I have a hard time with it.
And by the way, Robbie, when we talk about ISIS and like this boogeyman setup, the fact that most people, are not on a name basis like they were with Osama bin Laden, but the guy is al-Baghdadi. This is a guy that they had at Guantanamo Bay. Now, they've had countless sheep herders there for almost 18 years at this point. But somehow, the guy who ends up leading ISIS was detained there, and also Israeli forces were involved, and they had him for a little while. But he gets let back into the wild so ISIS can be created. I mean, the narratives are so over the top that are sold and so simplistic to the American people. They don't even question that anymore. So, with only a few more minutes left, I want to get your take on this whole Bolton situation, right? Pre-Bolton getting kicked out, you hear that Trump is going to meet with the Taliban in Camp David. And, he remember, we talked about that big dick swing and move. I think that was the last time we actually talked. But then, a couple days after we were done, it was also mentioned that Trump said he was maybe going to lift the sanctions on Iran. And that's really what put Bolton over the top. One, do you think that was even discussed? Or do you think that was posturing by the president to try to get more points for the anti-war crowd, knowing an election is coming up and saying, look, we had these two big disagreements? Or is it totally false? He would never even entertain lifting sanctions on Iran.
I think Trump, he likes to think of himself as a deal maker. So I do think it's possible that he definitely might have even floated that out there. However, I think that it's what's become clear to me, I guess, since the firing of Bolton, is that it's even more evident than ever that Trump's day-to-day opinions on war or how he feels about war change constantly. And he has all these opportunities, like even what you're talking about, the Camp David Taliban meeting that he was allegedly setting up. Trump could have actually used that moment to be like, look, I had to let Bolton go, or Bolton and I disagreed so much because he is just too much of a hawk. I wanted to do this. Why not bring the Taliban to Camp David and get this over with? Like, we've been here for too long. Instead, what Trump did is kind of swing his dick around and act like John Bolton wasn't tough enough for him in South America specifically. Yep. He said Bolton was holding me back in Venezuela. Really, dude? That's how you're going to use this moment? I mean, so just from a strategic point of view, I don't understand what he's doing, honestly. I mean, just from political calculation, you would think if he wanted to win that anti-war sector, he could have used that moment and been like, this guy is too much of a hawk. He had to be let go. This is the problem with DC. These people are too, hungry for war. I'm not. I don't want war. Didn't do that. I mean, so it's honestly really confusing to me. And I think Trump is just honestly all over the place and is just driven by different motives every day at this point. I don't even, it's hard to even see any consistency in it, like in any way. Like,
well,
I've kind of gone
what is consistent. The administration, I'll tell you what is consistent. The administration continues to be aggressive in the Middle East and take advice from guys like Henry Kissinger, hence the Pompeo-Kissinger meeting that got almost no press other than, oh, they're meeting Henry? Thumbs up. We love Henry. I mean, that should just show you where we're at, where that gets little to no press, right? It won't be discussed at the debates at all on the Democratic end. In fact, that's not even a point of critique that he's having his administration meet with an old warmongering dinosaur who is heartless and basically the archetype for a globalist of his generation. No discussion whatsoever. And that's where we're at, Robbie. Robbie, MediaRoots.org is the page. A very heavy agenda is the YouTube channel. Tell people how they can support you and see your stuff, man. You were just streaming right before this.
I was, Jason. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely stripped my channel of monetization. And so the way people can support me, if you want to actually donate to me, you can do so on my Patreon page, patreon.com/Robbie Martin. I also do a podcast every week with my sister, Media Roots Radio. Cover a lot of different subjects, and yeah, it's great to talk to you again, Jason. And always like coming on your show. I'll have to have you on mine sometime.
Yes, I love having you on, and we got to figure out when the next debate is so we can do a follow-up on that maybe, because those are always some really fun shows because there's just so much fresh bullshit to sniff out when you have like these establishment types up there for 3.5, 4 hours. Thank you again, Mr. Martin. It is a pleasure as always. I want to let people know that they can support me and not this guy, Joey B. Joey B over here, by thumbing this video up, sharing it with others, hitting that subscribe button, ringing that bell for notifications, but really just star this. We're doing 3, 4, 5, sometimes even 6, 7 videos a day about subjects that matter, that span the gamut, that aren't coming at it from a left-right perspective, but a right and wrong perspective. I am a documentary filmmaker. Loose Change Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, and Shade the Motion Picture are all available right here for free in the playlist section over at the documentaries. And I give all of my work for free. So if you want to support it, $5, $10, $15, it means the world to me over at this GoFundMe. We're going to start month 4 on October 1st. And I want to thank all those who have supported me and made this channel a reality. We're going to keep pumping them up on the road to 40K, 50K, 100K, and beyond. I love you guys, and I will see you on the flip side.